here we have a 50mm glass cabochon that I have painted with just black nail polish, a pupil. Now I've done this off camera, that way I could go ahead and just start, like, I wanted to let it dry so I could go ahead and start painting the rest of it. But the size of the cab is irrelevant. You'll really want something that is the size that you would like. Sorry, I'm by an open window and it's a very breezy day today, so I imagine the audio is probably picking up on that, so be patient with me. But I wanted a very large eye for our box today, so I'm going to set that off to the side. The only tool that I'm going to be using is this T-pin, and I'm just on a little silicone mat here. I like it because it just, the nail polish comes right off of it. So I'm going to start by doing a black edge, and I am just using, this is Sally Hansen Hard as Nails Extreme Wear, just blackout is the color name. And again though, the techniques for this apply whether, like, regardless of what color of paint that you're using. You know, actually that's not gonna, we'll just work directly on our surface today so that y'all can see what's going on. And I'm just going to start feathering in around the edges, just using, you don't always add more. And you can do this with acrylic paint as well. I use nail polish because I love the finish of it, like that very nice metallic kind of shimmery wet look that it has. Whereas I've found whenever I use acrylic paints, it's not always so vibrant as what I would like. So just, you will want to do this in a very well ventilated area though, if you're using the nail polish, because this gets a stink to it. And I'm just going to continue with a second layer. I dab off the first glob of paint because I don't want to just like do a big sploot of it. I'd like to be able to feather and add more in, have a little bit more control. Also, I kind of prefer using nail polish because each little vial has its own brush, and so whenever I do this with acrylic paint, I find I'm like rinsing my brush a whole lot, and I don't know, that just gets old. So I'm a very, very lazy crafter. Yeah, there we go, get a little bit better lighting in. So now the next color that I'm going to use, and I'm not going to give this too much time to dry as well. This is a Sinful Colors in Let's Talk, number 929. It's a really nice, like almost more bluey purple, but again, still very nice and metallic. And I'm just going out of frame to shake the bottles. And now I'm going to start layering this in with slightly larger strokes, longer strokes rather. Just building it up. Because again, we want that nice feathering. Because you can do an entire eye without doing any scraping at all. You can just kind of strategically paint it in and get a really nice soft gradient look just through painting. Though I do personally really like the effects that I can get from scratching with the T-pin or an awl or a needle or just whatever you might have on hand. And you can always flip it over and kind of check and see how it's coming along. You can see that very slight purple coming in on the edge. And I like to, here off to the side, I am going to be stacking my colors in the order of use. I'm going to try to do that where it's not blocking the light. Ooh, I got some coffee. I'm going to take a sip. I want to thank y'all for joining me here today. Like, thank you so much. I know it's been a really long time if you've been following along with the channel. Since I have done Dragon Eyes, I actually burnt myself out on the smell of nail polish so badly that I had to take a break, and I'm just now getting to where I can be around the smell of it again. But it's always nice to come back to a craft that I haven't touched in a while and find myself falling in love all over again. Ooh. Just shaking up. This next color is Plum Euphoria, number 402 by Sally Hansen Color Therapy. Ooh, and I don't know why, but this nail polish smells like stink bugs, like squash bugs, which is like my least favorite smell in the world, but it only smells that way while it's wet. So there's that at least, but ugh, it's the worst. And as I build in more layers, I get a little bit messier about my feathering, but that's okay. It's just because it's an effect that I like, which if I'm doing something and it's not your favorite, you can do it your way, your preferred way, on your Dragon Eyes, or whatever kind of eye it's going to end up being. And now from here we can actually start just stippling, I think is the correct pronunciation. I'm just stippling the color there in the middle, because why not? But already I just love that nice little bit of purple touch gradient on the edges. And now, let's see, we can start coming into slightly lighter colors now. I'm shaking up this is China Glaze in Creative Fantasy. I love the names of these nail polishes, you guys. Like, they're so ridiculous. It's like, I don't know. Ooh, but this one is really nice, I'm gonna say. It has a very fine, well, finer than the other one at least, brush that really lets me lay down a thinner line. And I'm being a little messier, a little rougher, almost bringing in like a dry brush effect, where I'm just poking a little bit too, leaving some dots. And let's do the other side, because it starts to take more and more medium, whether you're using acrylic paint or nail polish, because we're just laying down on a bigger area now than what we were when we were just touching the edges. But I absolutely missed and love painting Dragon Eyes. They're so, well, I mean, I call them that, but really this one's gonna be on a box of tentacles. There's nothing like specifically dragon about it. That's just what I call it. Okay, so far we only have 4 colors on there, the black and the 3 purples, and check out, I mean, that's just nice, y'all. Like, I like that. And now let's do, I'm gonna go back to our darkest color again, our darkest purple, that is. And just wiping the excess off the edge. I'm gonna come in and do just some very light, like spaced significantly apart. Well, you know, then I fill it in. Okay, so I'm just feathering some more Wiping off the excess. And just brushing it in. Because I think I'm not going to do any scratching on this one, you guys. Because I'd really like to be able to back this with a fluorescent purple resin that I just think would look so cool. So already I'm really loving that texture and everything. And I think I want to come in, normally I would go through with, this is like my favorite color in the world, and I'm glad I stockpiled it because I haven't been able to find any more of it, but it's Grey's Anatomy by Wet n Wild. It's very similar to the color that I'm wearing, which is like amethyst pool or something, I don't know, it's in the other room. But that one's still in production, but it's just a nice like color shifty, almost labradorite flavored, like it's kind of that colorscape. And normally I would have just filled in the whole back with that. And I think I still may. And then add the scratches. I don't know. What do we do? Okay, well I'm doing this now. So we're going to go ahead and fill it in. But then I may still go over the back with, I don't know, we'll see. But I just really am feeling this right now. That I put on a glob of it because I want there to be enough that it can pool and do its little color shifty thing that it does. Because if you can kind of see, it's just like whenever you use like mica alcohol inks or like Pearl-Ex pigment pours and resin, if you've ever done anything like that, where it kind of starts developing its own little swirls of pattern, or like the PBO paints that can do like some really cool like fantasy effects and stuff. So just pull it all out to the edges, globbing my brush in there, and I'm going to do just a couple more drops here in the center to make sure it's nice and thick. Oh, I love that breeze coming through, I tell y'all what. And then we can just tap it to help it spread. But I don't want to be pushing around too much because even though I let that resin or the pupil cure for quite some time, and it can still, like, for lack of a better term, rehydrate, like become smeary again from the fresh polish being put onto the back of it. So I'm going to let this, oh, I want to look at it so bad, like right now, but I know that I'm going to make a mess. So let's just look at it real quick. Y'all ready? It's beautiful. I love it. Okay, so I am going to let this dry for about maybe 20 or 30 minutes. And I kind of want to, we could. Let's go ahead. I'm not letting it dry. I'm a liar. I'm just going to come through and drag, focusing on coming from the center of the pupil. I just want to pull this, and apparently we let it dry just enough that it gave like a really cool gooey effect. So you can see how it's kind of globbing up near the sides and then oozing back. I love that. Okay, let's flip it and see. Now that is awesome. Okay, now I will let this dry and we will see about the potential of scratching the back some more after it's completely dry, and backing it with a UV purple, which the fluorescent purples never really like super duper fluoresce, like they're not as intense as I want them to be, so we may actually back it with a blue or something, or even a green. Oh, that would look so cool, but we'll see how it goes. And I'm gonna let this dry. I will meet you guys back here after an unknown amount of time. That's for future Dawn to let you know. Alrighty, y'all. So this is how our eye has come out so far, and you can see it's still quite transparent in places. And I decided to go with this glow-in-the-dark green because you can see it makes a really cool impact shining through. And I cannot wait to show you guys how it looks whenever it's actually glowing. It is so intense and cool. But I am going to be doing like a coppery purple green gradient for the tentacles on this. So we're going to start. I have a bunch of molds set up here. I am mixing equal parts of Art and Glow resin, 1 ounce of the resin and 1 ounce of the hardener. I did have my mask on, but I've taken it off so that I can speak freely with y'all, but you might be able to hear it. But I've got a fan going to kind of pull the fumes away from me. So, very important. Art and Glow is pretty low VOC, but nobody can make decisions about your safety better than you whenever it comes to using gloves and masks and stuff like that. So, we only get one set of lungs for the most part. we ought to take care of them. And getting this crap in your lungs is no joke. Also, don't eat it. It's obvious, you'd think, but here we are. So now I am going to put in about a teaspoon. I've been mixing this for about 3 minutes, and it is chock full of bubbles. But that's because I'm a very lazy mixer, and I don't really put a whole lot of effort into not getting bubbles in it. So let's see if I can snap. Well, heck, I don't have a, give me a sec. Huzzah. I can't find my teaspoon scoop, so I'm going to be eyeballing about a teaspoon is what I typically use of glow powder per like 2 ounces, because I like a really heavily pigmented, like I want lots of glow happening. So that's also why I'm not really worried about the bubbles, because this isn't going to be translucent enough for that to really make much of a difference. That is so green, you guys. Ah, I love it. Okay, so just getting that very well incorporated. And I also have an applicator bottle ready over here for getting this poured into, because it only is going to take a very little bit actually for our eye that we're doing, but I like to, if I'm going to go through the trouble of mixing stuff up and waiting for it to dry, I've always got a couple of irons in the fire as far as projects that I'm working on goes. So right now I am getting some crystals ready for some headdresses that we're working on. So just scraping some more of this in. You could also, if you had some little like miniature bottles lined up, you could totally make some little glow like potion bottles, like some fun Halloween themed jewelry and stuff like that. I'm going to set that off there to the side because it will settle in the cup, and then we'll be able to get that out of there as well. So I'm going to start with applying the resin to our eye here. Also, if you're hearing all sorts of like beeping and stuff, it's a beautiful day, so I have the windows open, but there's construction going on our street, so that's a thing. And I'm going to try to pull this not completely towards the edge because, well, the back of this isn't really going to be visible, but I want to make sure that we have it nice and thick and domed where we want it to be showing up on our eye. And I'm going to set this off onto a different work surface, something that is a lot more flat and level than my current area. Hopefully. Oh my gosh. I don't want it to start dripping, but we're almost, oh boy. There we go. Okay, so that should work out. I'm going to grab another couple of things. We've got this here. Where's my other work surface at? So we can transfer this over. Well, it's got stuff. So, my favorite is a clipboard with one of these. This is actually like a silicone trivet, but I love it because if I overflow, the little cells catch it. And I like a clipboard just because, I mean, they're so useful, you guys. Come on. Like, I don't think I have to justify that to you guys. So these are just a bunch of little crystal molds that I don't much care for specifically for jewelry purposes, but I love them for utilizing with our costume pieces that we do. So I'm just going to go ahead and fill these up using up the rest of the resin, and then I will meet you guys back here in about... It's just occurred to me, I just put resin on the back of that eye, and now I'm not going to be able to bake it. Oh, we'll figure something out. I'll meet you guys back here for the next step. So here you can see we've got some bubbles forming, and I'm just going to switch on loud noises, our heat gun, and I'm holding it far enough away that the air isn't going to be moving the resin. But we do want to go ahead and pop those bubbles. Once we start getting a little bit of movement, I'm going to stop. And then I'll come back in about 10 more minutes and give it another pass over with the heat gun. And I'll keep doing that until bubbles stop rising. Okay, so it is the following day, and it looks like we have some leakage around to the front. So I'm going to very carefully come through with a razor and just scrape off all that excess. Typically it starts to like pop off, but this is feeling a little gummier than usual. I probably didn't wait long enough. So I'm just going to continue peeling and scraping. There we go. This is why I really like using glass eyes, because it really lets us, you know, if this had happened on an eye that I had made out of resin, like in a mold or something, well, probably would have just left it in the mold and backed it with the glow in the dark from there. But I really like the durability of glass eyes. Clean our resin off of there. Always making sure to keep your fingers out of the way. So let's go take a look at this out in the sunlight and see how it looks. So this is our eye. Hey kitty, in the sunlight. And this is our eye glowing, not even in that dark of a corner. Like, so I'm just making a little bit of shade with my body. Let's go see how it looks in an even darker area. But oh my gosh, that looks so cool. Okay, so I'm hiding between some blackout curtains in my house like a weirdo, but look at how cool this is. You get like, wow. That is so vibrant, like intense. Same eye with some light going. Oh. Okay, so I've assembled the clays that I'm going to be using. I have a bright green, which is a metallic, like kind of Granny Smith apple color. Just some glow. These are all Primo Sculpey. And then this one is Purple Pearl. I really love the metallic effects. That's just me. But the techniques remain the same regardless of what color scheme you're going with. And I may actually be incorporating just a little bit of black as well. So here I have some dirty scrap black that I'll be using to just darken down the ends, maybe. I also have our little box and some aluminum foil. So what I'm going to be doing here, aluminum foil noises intensify, is I want to wrap our box in a way that will keep the tentacles that we're going to be sculpting from sticking to the box. So I actually think I'm going to cut a strip, and we may use multiple strips. There we go. And these are my junk scissors that I use specifically for stuff that is so bad for scissors. So yeah, I think this was a good way to go, because I don't really need to worry about protecting the bottom from anything. I just want to get it to where it will close nice and flat. So just wrapping all the way around. And I'm going to do a little snip there and a little snip there. But everything else should tuck under nicely. No adhesives are necessary. The foil will kind of just hold itself on. And then closing our lid nice and firm. And I am going to just fold that down because I do want that protection over the hinge. And this should just help for if we have any problems about our clay sticking to the wood. And we will be leaving this on for the entirety of the project until after we've finished baking. So I'm just using the handle of my scissors to burnish it down, because whenever the foil's off, I want the tentacles to sit as flush to the box as we can. Set that off to the side. Oops, bumping the tripod. I always try to like put it in a spot where I won't hit it, but without fail, I hit it. So I'm starting with about 1 ounce each of the purple pearl, the bright green, our glow, and then for our black, I'm just gonna eyeball it about this much. And we can always add in more later too. But I'm going to start by just conditioning these. So I'll be running them through my pasta machine on the thickest setting. So this is my pasta machine. I have it on its thickest setting and most of the dust cleared off. I actually saved the box from this pasta machine whenever, because I have to buy a new one like every year and a half, because I'm very hard on the gears, but it's a dust cover, you guys. And I think I actually want to like decoupage the box cover, but let me know if that's something you guys would be interested in seeing a video on. But it's really gone a long way in keeping this from just getting the sands of time stuck in it, basically. So to condition the clay, I'm just going to fold it in half, feed it in, and roll it through until whenever I fold it, there's no cracking or anything like that. I really like Primo Sculpey. For the most part, it's been, or rather Sculpey Primo. Sorry, that's so like meditative. Puts me at ease to just crank stuff through the pasta machine. So if you get any like dog hairs or bubbles and stuff, you can remove them or pop them. So like there's a bubble. Then I just stretch them a bit till they pop. Actually, that was like a rock. How'd that get in there? There we go. So I'm going to do this to all of our clay and then meet you back here for the next step. So I have our sheets rolled out. So if each of these is an ounce, this is probably a little less than half an ounce, just for if that's helpful to you. And I'm going to just slice these in half like this. And I'm going to layer them like so, with the lines lined up. Now, if I were just doing a 2-color blend, I would set it up like this, but since I'm doing a 3-color blend, I'm actually going to extend it a little bit weird. I used to have like a square shaped cookie cutter, and I would do like very meticulous, like carefully shaped shapes, and now it's just a crapshoot, like so bad. I'm gonna trim that off, and I'm gonna trim this off, but then I'm gonna place it like right here, smush it in a bit. The main thing is you just want to have areas of overlap, because that little bit of glow and the lot of green, and then the little bit of green and a lot of glow will gradiate together. And I do want to leave a solid color gap to allow there to be a bit of just solid bright green before we start getting into the purple territory. Same thing on where that purple is going to be gradiating into our black as well. And then leaving just a little bit here on the side where that will be like solid black. And now we can use an acrylic roller, making sure all the dust and dog fur is off of it. We've had the windows open, and it's been very, very dusty with like, just, I don't know, like, not pollen, but maybe, I don't know. Whatever the fall equivalent of pollen is, I think it's just dusty outside. But it gets into the house and it gets on everything, but I love having the fresh air, dusty as it may be, flow through. So we've rolled that together just a little bit, and now I am going to start passing this. I'm going to pass it first through the pasta machine this way, just to get everything rolled out like to thickness. And then I'll show you the next step for whenever, because I made this way too wide for my pasta machine. So I've rolled this out to thickness, and you can really tell that that's way too much. Like, it's way too thick. So I'm gonna come through and start just doing a little bit of like an accordion fold. So keeping it to around 1/2 inch in depth, and I am just folding this, or trying to. Making sure that and this will maintain the integrity of the blend that we want to get. It's just getting everything much more compact this way, so that way hopefully we can start feeding it through our pasta machine and getting a really cool blend effect. All of the tools and materials that we are using will be linked down in the video description below to kind of help you guys shop if you're looking for, you know, some new tools or just something different, or if you're just starting out and you don't know where to begin. Shopping through those links does help support our channel at no additional cost to y'all. And then we also have links to our shop where you can get hand-painted dragon eyes, some different tools and materials that we make here in-house, as well as like cabochons and just, I don't know, all the different stuff that we sell. Because like, of all of the tools that I've been using here lately, this glass cutting board has been like the best, because it's easy to clean up. Like, I just use a razor blade and tidy it up after I've been painting. It's nice and flat. It has a ruler in it. So like, it is a ruler, or grid board rather, I guess. So I'm not losing my ruler all the time. It's just, it makes me very happy. It's a very, very nice cutting board, and I would recommend it. Shameless self-promotion. But seriously though, like, I wouldn't recommend anything to y'all that I wouldn't recommend to my past self, more or less, like whenever I was getting into crafting, because it can be overwhelming trying to figure out like what tools should I buy for this, what tool should I buy for that, is this one good, like, even though it's less expensive, is this one worth the extra cost? And so I try to help you out as much as possible with stuff like that. So here you can see our much condensed blend, and I'm just using my acrylic roller to thin this down just a very tiny bit, because I need to get it to where it's thin enough that it will fit through my pasta machine. So let's get the camera moved over and see if we can cram this into the pasta machine. Okay, so this is how it's looking. You can see that's quite thick, like over a 1/4 of an inch thick for sure. And I'm just gonna feed it into the top and then start cranking on through. This pasta machine is a champion. Like, oh my god. So that's the first pass, and then I'm going to fold it, lining the colors up if I can. Just making sure I'm not trapping any air bubbles there at the tip. And then I'm going to put that in like this. There's our second pass. There's third pass. And we can fold this and pass it through just however many times is necessary. So I'm actually going to get that going and into some time lapse. I'm going to try to keep track, but honestly I've already forgotten what number I just said to you guys. So oof. So now here you can see I have been lining up the lines like very carefully, but now I'm offsetting it just a bit to try to get a little bit more of a gradient between these two colors. And we're starting to get really wide now too on our blend. So I'm going to do, I think, just one more pass through. Just pinching the ends together. So it's not quite as much of a gradient as I would have liked, but you know, I can dig it. Let's see if we can't make it a little more what I was going for. Because sometimes when I'm crafting, I'm like super chill and I'm like, yeah, this is fine. And other times I'm like, no, this is really what I like, specifically, this is what I wanted. Let's try to make that happen. Trying to make sure that I'm not incorporating any dog hair or anything like that. I am just rolling this up. And now from here, we can actually start to compress. And I am just squeezing and smushing all of our clay evenly as much as possible. Is that a big old air bubble? I do think so. We'll figure it out. So yeah, getting that nice, just nice and compressed. Smushing in the ends. So now that we've rolled this into like an 1.5 inch plug, we could slice it in half, and I think I am going to. Oh, just because I absolutely love the way that looks on the inside. And you can see that actually gave us a really cool feathering effect. So maybe let's go with that. I don't know, because like we could leave it feathered or we could continue folding and blending. So I am going to pinch this like so, just pinching it, trying to keep it still narrow, because you'll notice it likes to spread out horizontally as we feed it through the machine. So let's get this turned back around and we can kind of do one at each. So we're at the pasta machine, still on the thickest setting, and we're going to feed this through. And that looks really, really cool, I'm just going to say. But let's go ahead and fold, and we're not lining them up perfectly with each other, we're offsetting them by maybe about 1/4 of an inch. And I do find it is a lot easier to it's much more manageable to use a smaller amount of clay. But I'm always so impatient, and so sometimes I'll try to just wrestle through, but then I have to remind myself that sometimes it's better to not struggle against it and wrestle through. So still just doing more of that offsetting to try to blend those layers. And I think that's going to be a lot more what I am looking for. Okay, I think I've offset enough. Now I need to just get it blended. Yeah, that's a lot more what I was looking for. And even then, it's still a little bit sharper of a line between the two, but I'm okay with that. So maybe just a few more blends. Yeah, there we go. That's what I'm talking about. So I'm going to do that to the other piece as well, and then I'll meet you guys back here for the next step. So this is how our blend came out, and I have to say, I'm very pleased with it. I like it very much. So I'm going to snip off about an inch or so off of one of the relatively straighter sides, and we are actually going to use that for something else entirely. But I am going to come in now, and I'm going to put the straight edge towards me. I'm going to do, these are going to end up being our tentacles. So I'm going to have one that's 3/4 of an inch, and then one that's at 1/2 inch, and then another that's at 3/4 of an inch, and then another that's at 1/2 inch or so, and then we'll have that odd little bit left over. Now, I'm not basing this on reality at all. I don't know if that's been apparent so far, but it's something to keep in mind, that if you want a very realistic octopus or tentacles, then you know, maybe make it the actual number of tentacles or arms that an octopus would normally have. But I'm just seeing how many I can make. And I just wanted some variation in the amount of material per tentacle. So there's another one at 3/4, there's another one at 1/2, there's another one at 3/4 with another just odd little bit. So how many legs is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's a good number of arms for a little deep sea eldritch horror, wouldn't you say? So from here, I am just starting at the far edge of what we're doing. Let's see if I can't maybe zoom in a little bit for you guys. I don't know if y'all can hear a bird outside losing its dang mind, but there's also construction equipment going and all sorts of very peaceful, frantic, horrible noises. Yay! So from here, I just want to get this all rolled up, and I'm going to make like a stumpy little lump log out of it. And I'm doing that by, as I roll, pushing my fingers together. And this will condense this down into a nice thick little tentacle. And I'm just getting these nice and short so that I can smush them together a little bit more easily, to really get those like seams and stuff out of the way, really nice and conditioned. I want that blend to be really nice. And quite frankly, it's just fun to play with clay. So now, yeah, I'm gonna roll that out, and now that I have it kind of a shape or a thickness that I want, I'm going to start controlling the shape by tapering it down through the rest of the tentacle. And you may find that's easier for you to do in one direction than another. And that's okay. There is no right or wrong way to do this stuff, by the way. And that's about the shape that I'm looking for. A little bit of a carrot, a nice petite point, but I don't want it to be gradiated off too rapidly because we are still going to be adding all of the suckers to this. So let's do one of the weird shaped ones now, like where there's not a whole lot of material. And if you don't like that seam that made that like little line, you can strategically have it placed on like the bottom, whatever the bottom's going to end up being of your tentacle. Or I personally absolutely love it. It just adds such a natural and cool variation that I would have a hard time doing on purpose. So I actually like to do a little bit of a twist maybe, and then settle that in. And you can see that makes some really cool little just variations that add interest with like very little effort or input from my part. I'm just the hands, the clay is doing a lot of the prettiness on its own. Shrinking it down some more. There we go. And then just setting it off to the side, like so. And we will go through and do that on all of these, but before we do, yeah, I'm going to do that and then I'll show you what we're going to do with that other piece. Okay, so the next step, I am going to be using this one piece that we did save, and I've mixed up a little bit more, or conditioned rather, some more of that glow in the dark. And I'm just going to feed it through on the thickest setting. And I'm going to try to get it to where it's the same width as this piece. So I'm just going to fold it in half and feed it through. Sometimes it becomes a two-headed snake. That is fine. Bah, it's annoying, but it's fine. And I'm just going to smush that together a little bit. Almost there. Probably one more pass through will do us. Okay, and now from here, I'm going to line up, make sure I get all of the, oh yeah, I set this down someplace dirty. I'm gonna get all the little bits of crud and stuff out of my clay, and I'm going to line up this end with that end, just a bit of overlap, it'll be fine. And I'm going to move the, well, let's feed it through once just at this setting to level out that mid bit. And now from here, I'm going to reduce it a click. Feed it on through. Reduce it a click. I don't mean to block the view. Feed it on through. Reduce it a click, and it's getting cumbersome, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to clip off, just cut off that last little bit of where it's all just one solid color. Can't remember if I passed it through or not, so just to be safe, passing it through. Getting that little fold out, putting it down a click, passing it through. And I'm going to do this just a few more times. It does get kind of sticky. That's okay. If you have a motor for your pasta machine, I have one, but I don't use it for tutorials because it's loud, and I want you guys to be able to hear me as well as possible. But it definitely makes this easier to be able to use two hands. So if you have like a motor or a friend who's willing to be just cranking the machine for you, then that is fantastic. I'm gonna try to unstick this just a little more, and let's do one more pass through. So to the 7th or 8th setting on my Makin's pasta machine. Now also we can go a bit, get it out of the way. I just like to get it through. There we go. Very, very cool. Nice and thin. Very thin. Cool, cool, cool. So now we're back over here, and I'm actually going to take this piece that we had cut off, that's maybe on the 3rd or 4th setting, and I'm going to lay it. And I know it's overlapping a little bit, but it's going to give us a really cool itty bitty bit of like a swirl. The magic happens in the details, y'all. And then from here, I'm just rolling this up, trying to keep everything in line as much as possible, not incorporating any air bubbles if I can help it. I'm going to scooch it back and just roll, roll, roll. Instead of lining up specifically with the front or the back edge, I'm trying to just keep it more, or less centered. Oops. Oh my goodness, God. There we go. Yeah. And I'm just going to keep rolling this very carefully, hoping that it will capture the full gradient. There's how it's looking. Then just lining it up and rolling. And we could, if you wanted, roll out a very thin piece of black and do a black edge, but I think this will be good like this. So here we have our nice little plug that we've made of a Skinner Blend jelly roll, and I'm going to start just rolling it out, trying to apply firm and even pressure as I do to get it to, because you can see the outside will start engulfing, like the ends will start to kind of pucker out. So I like to try to maybe, let's pinch it a little, pinch and roll, and then squish from the center, pulling towards the tips. Because this is going to end up being our tentacle suckers. So I'm going to try to get this as long and narrow as I can. The ends are going to be weird. That's okay. We'll use them for something else. So I'm just moving it down my board. Taking off any little crumblies. Making sure all of the clay is making good contact with itself. Because like here you can see it goes like almost hollow. Okay. So from here, we can actually cut off that end and see how it's looking. Ah, check that out. Oh, that's neat. So we'll set that off to the side. We could use it for something else, I'm sure. And I'm going to just cut a 3-inch segment of this before setting the rest off to the side. And from here, I want to roll this out nice and even if I can. There we go. And I'm just going to start taking some little cuts off of this. Now we could take them and roll them, which is something I would have done in the past. which makes very cute effects. If you can see, it's got like a nice little dot in the middle, but I'm going to try to do this in a way, and again, I'm going to cut it into little 2-inch sections just to make it a little bit more manageable. Oh, here's the mailman. So I've chopped up into like 1 or 2, or actually 2 to 3 millimeter thick segments, and then you can see I've added just a little bit of a taper to, I cut off one of the thicker pieces, because I'm definitely going to be having more small tentacle suckers than big tentacle suckers, but I did want to get some big ones in there, and I'm saving a little pile of my scrap too. But just coming through and cutting some slices, trying to keep them as uniform in size or like in thickness as possible. And I'm going to be keeping these guys in order. I'm not going to be mixing them up like how I did over here, because I really do want to be stacking them on in order of largest to smallest. Just coming through with my razor, trying to not cut up any of the ones that I always end up with a messy chopping board, so there's that. Okay, I'm going to take the little end piece like that. And so now from here, let's start with this bad boy. He looks pretty good. And I'm going to take my largest one and place right there. Let's actually keep this on our work surface. I'm going to see if I can't zoom in for you guys just a bit. There we go. And I'm going to place them, and by them I mean the little suckers, just a little offset from each other. And I like that while cutting them, slicing the suckers with the razor, it smushed it just a little bit, because they aren't always perfect little circles, and I actually prefer this little shape that they become. And on each of these arms, I guess, I'm gonna go down the entire length. And I had cut, oh, what was this? About a 2-inch long section from our main jelly roll that we had done. And I'm just going to use that whole section, 1 2-inch length per tentacle, and then fill in the tip with these smaller ones that we had cut from the 2-inch long section. But yeah, just keep placing them, trying to not stack them on top of each other. But just kind of alternately. And then I have this ball stylus tool that we can shape the inside with, or let me go grab it, because I don't think, well, do I? Yeah, I don't have it over here. Let me go grab it for my leatherworking stuff, but there is a leatherworking stamp that is absolutely perfect for what we're about to do here. So this is a tool called a seeder, S-E-E-D-E-R, and it would normally be used in leatherworking for like filling in the center of a flower, or adding in just like a little, there it goes, got it to focus, but you can see it has just a little bit of texture there, and it makes such a cool effect when pushing it into the centers of these little suckers. And I am trying to get it nice and centered up. And this just ensures really nice contact. You don't want your suckers falling off. But also whenever we go through at the end of the project and antique this, hopefully that will give us some really cool depth to our little suckers. And then from there we can still, well, I thought I had, here it is. I like using a porcupine quill for this, but you could use anything that's kind of pointy. I like to come into the very center and just add a little, tiny little hole, but that might not be necessary on this one. So I'm going to resume laying down the tentacles. Laying down the suckers on the tentacles. I try to stick to doing it just on one side because we can always sculpt it around a little bit more later. But we have 11 tentacles to do this too. Let's go. Okay, so we have made our tentacles, and I'd had the idea to, since we've put resin on the back of this cab and I don't want to risk baking it for fear of the resin bubbling or yellowing or discoloring, or it can do some weird stuff when you heat it up, and I don't want to risk that. And I was like, hey, what if I had a cab that was just like this one but wasn't painted yet, and I could use it as a stand-in, to keep everything in the right shape, and then after baking just remove that and then put the correct one in, kind of glue everything in place with some super glue and call it good. Well, I think that would have worked, except for I have searched high and low, and this is the only cab that I have in this size and shape. So we're going to have to figure something else out. So I'm going to set that off to the side. I've conditioned the remainder of our black clay. That's kind of like a dirty scrap clay. And I'm going to start just draping and shaping this around. Now you'll notice the clay doesn't really want to stick a whole lot to the bare wood. And what we'll do to remedy that is to use some liquid polymer clay. I just wanted to get the shape of our box. That way I could go through and cut out that hexagonal shape. With our cutter. Just giving it some good slices. And then we will use, let's see, what do we have? I thought I had a bottle somewhere. Here it is. This is liquid Sculpey. It's a liquid polymer clay, and it works fantastically as an adhesive. So before gluing this down, I'm just going to test fit it, and that looks great. Now a little does go a long way, surprisingly, with this liquid polymer clay. Now this is a silver color. It's a moot point. It's all going to be covered. I just happen to have the silver on hand, and I'm all out of the stuff that dries or cooks clear. So I'm just using the silver, but it all seems to work the same. Though honestly, I will say the silver has tended to have like a better consistency for me, though that could have just been that was the bottle that I was using. More data is required before I can make any sort of definitive call or have like a solid opinion on which I prefer. So I'm just using a big craft stick. And also, I'm not worried too much about how my edges are looking because I am going to be painting all of this black on the outside of the box anyhow. So if there's any silver toned clay oozing out the sides, it's just going to get painted over. Okay, so now we will take our clay and position it there on the surface. And I don't want to collapse the edges too much, like smush them down. I'm pretty happy with this just being where it's at. And now we get to, let's make sure, yep, that's the front right there. This is. Man, I really do wish. Oh, and I almost want to just bake it just to see what happens. Because what if we bake it for like just a little bit? And since it's encased, it might be okay. I think I'm going to try it. We'll see. If it's horrible, you will know. For your pieces. So I want the tentacles coming out. Do we want them sucker side up? Because I kind of really like that. But also maybe just... Now since these guys have been sitting, the tentacles that we've made have been sitting just about all day, they're going to be a little stiff and they may crack on us, even though we conditioned the clay just as well as we could. So I want to make sure that I'm being very slow and gradual with how I'm encouraging the clay around. So you'll notice I'm kind of moving it into position and then holding it there. And you can see we have a little bit of a crack right there. So that lets us know that we need to be a little bit more gentle. Okay, so I'm just placing this down, smushing this around, and I'm just going to touch the clay, the tentacle back onto the base of the clay right there. It doesn't have to be making like good contact or anything, I just want to encourage it. Because everything's all shifty on me anyways right now. And you could, if you're having problems with that shifting around, you could just pop this without the tentacles or anything into the oven for about 15 minutes and just let it start to sit. Oops, it looks like that little piece folded up on us. Yeah, my goal here is to try to do this without causing a whole lot of destruction to the sculpting that we've been doing and stuff. So I had one of my little tentacles break, so I'm just going to put a fresh one on there. Not tentacles, one of my suckers broke. There we are. It's looking pretty good. So yeah, if we're able to heat it up with our hands a little bit. And we can kind of just smush that. Make some nice contact. Then I think I'm going to keep this going. There we are. I'm just placing the tentacles at first because I am going to want to test and make sure that we can still open the box. So I don't want any tentacles being too in the way of it hinging backwards. I think what we may end up doing will be to attach the eyeball with a product called Epoxy Sculpt after it's been baked, but we'll see. I don't know, I really, really, really want this to work, so... And just for the sake of, you know, presentation, I really like the tentacles being faced forward. Like with their little sucker cups showing. Okay, so this seems to be working. There we go. And one more little tentacle in the back. Got that, just smushing it down. Now I only did 10 of the 11. I did save this one because I was thinking about using it for attaching the eye. So now from here we get to start training the tentacles into their shape. Again, going very slow and gradual with them. If I had had more of a plan, I probably could have shaped them earlier in the day when they were still kind of warm. But it's actually pretty chilly in the house right now. So we'll see how that goes. I really thought that I was going to end up having them be a lot more snug to the box, which is why I lined it with that foil. But I'm starting to think now that I want to let them have their own life and do what they want to do. Kind of protecting the box, coming in around it. My favorite part is playing with the little tentacle tips. Because they're so cute. So again, just slowly. Patience is going to be key here. The last thing we want to do is to split one of our tentacles. So it's almost like styling hair. It's like, how do we want this to be framing everything? So again, just bringing it up. Like, how cute is that little tentacle, y'all? So these tentacles seem to have what in wire wrapping I would call spring back. They don't really want to stay exactly where you put them. They start to kind of extend out and relax a little bit. So that's okay. It's just something to keep in mind. Now also something that we could do is we could have positioned these and then removed them and set them on like a tile and bake them and then bring them in and apply them with epoxy sculpt. So that's always an idea if you wanted, since we may have been using the epoxy sculpt anyways for attaching the eye. But I don't know, I kind of like doing it like this because it makes me feel like I'm giving the tentacles more relation to each other, as opposed to just shaping a bunch of tentacles randomly and then trying to stick them in to look like something on purpose, you know? This reminds me almost a little bit of those octopi that, or octopods, maybe? What's the correct version of that? But the ones who, like, carry around the little shells for protection. Like, this is this little box. Look, this little tentacles, ooh! Yeah, okay, that's fine. I need help. So I'm just squishing and smushing. Nice and slow, though. And you could have them be symmetrical. But I kind of like how I want each of these tentacles to have a little bit of a life of its own. As though it were thinking and moving independently. So again, just twisting. I need to add a nice little bit of twist to this one. Not sure why, it's just what I feel like doing. Before we start curling the hair, not the hair, but curling it in. This way. Now again, in an effort to keep these up out of the way of the hinge, I am going to bring this one in and maybe try to encourage it to attach there. Looks like I think this one's going to need to come in a little bit more, but we'll see. Oops. And if you start to get a little bit of a break or a crack, you can kind of pet it out a little. But I'm seeing one start right there, so I don't want to push it. And we may actually be able to, again, for presentation purposes, bring that guy up that way. And then bring this, oh, and see there, I was rushing it, and it snapped, but we can just smush it back together real quick and pretend like that didn't happen. Fortunately, polymer clay is really great about binding to itself when you've baked it. So I think it'll be alright. Oh, you know, it'd be super cute if that were a little heart. So let's see if we can't bring that up and maybe pinch it together just a little bit so that it's a little bit of a heart. There we go. And we may actually be able to prop these guys up in the back a little bit with just some more. I'm just taking some of this scrap and just propping that up, because once we bake it, it'll hold its shape just fine. So the heart might be cheesy. It is cheesy, but I love it, so who cares? Okay. Oh, I'm risking so much with the stinking eye, but oh well. Okay, so I'm taking it and I'm just really smushing it into place. And so that's going to help bind everything down. And so I had thought that I could do like a little lid thing. Or I may just come around and yeah, we may just do a couple of layers of lids and then some of these guys, the little snakes that we had earlier. Just going to set that off to the side for a moment. Saving all these little dots because we'll be using those to kind of merge and meld everything in together. So I am reducing this significantly, this last tentacle. Yeah, ideally, if I were doing this for not tutorial purposes, I would make a tentacle, place it, and shape it while it were still warm from being worked, because we'd have a lot less cracking that way. We'd have a lot less kind of that spring back of the tentacles not wanting to stay in their position. I'm just so nervous. I don't want to ruin everything, but let me check and make sure it still opens. Oh yeah, it still opens. So you kind of want that tentacle to stay up like that. You kind of want this one to stay up. Like, we'll see. It might be okay that they're relaxed down. We'll see. Okay, so I've shaped this out, and now I'm going to cut it in half with my tissue blade. And now I have what will become my top lid and bottom lid. Mostly. Now, I'm not going to have tentacles, or not tentacles, suckers on these two little shapes that I'm making. Little tapered snakes. Okay, so there's that one. Like, it might have just been a good idea for, instead of me using resin, if I just mixed that pigment into like a clear nail polish, like something that would have dried. And I think I will go on record as saying that is my recommended route, as opposed to using the 2-part resin. And I am going to be baking this in a toaster oven instead of my regular food oven, just in case there's like horrible fumes and it's like the worst. So, because I've baked nail polish hundreds of times before on painted eyes like this, and it works just fine. Okay, so now I'm going to do the glow in the dark end as the end that gets the little spiral. And you could do this part really however you like. I just like doing it. Foop. But yeah, you can see this was warm clay and it spiraled up so much more nicely than whenever it's warm or whenever it's cool. Please pardon me, it's late, words are hard. Like, ugh. And we could have the tentacles only, like, we could have them be both on the same side, the colored ends. Yeah, let's do that. Very cool. And now these guys, these little snakes, I am just going to roll out, tapering on the ends. And I'm going to use them as a little bit of a liner on the inside of that. No particular reason except for just because I wanna. So again, I'm just rolling it out a little bit thinner and tapering the ends. And now we can roll up that end and roll up this end and just do a cute little flump, a cute little bit. There we go. And now I'm going to use my porcupine quill and I am going to add in just a little bit of texturing. Just poking a bunch of dots. Let's see if zooming in might be helpful. But yeah, just a bunch of dots, just on that one part of the clay. And it can just do so much, I think, to offer a little bit of difference in texture. So there's one side, coming through to the other side. And if you feel like you get best results with your hand in one position, don't feel like you have to be like wrenching your hand around it into an uncomfortable position. Move the piece to suit you. I don't know why that's always something that was, I guess it was instilled in me in school that it's like they wanted you, the teacher would make me straighten my paper up on the desk instead of writing with it angled. So it made me feel like I had to function within that form. And it's like, no, you do not have to hold your stupid paper completely like geometrically perfect on your desk. It does not affect like how well your essay is going to come out. Like, ugh, oh my god, no. So I'm trying to deprogram myself from that hogwash. I mean, unless somebody can explain to me why it's just so much better, but I'm harboring apparently a lot of resentment and anger about, but that was so dumb. And like, I was always getting in trouble for holding my paper like wrong. Like, blah. So yeah, in no way at all do you have to hold your artwork in any particular way other than what suits you best. Okay, so now from here we have all of these nifty little glowy lumps of stuff. And we can take one and boop, drop it down into right there and give it a little smush. And we can take one and boop, we can just start placing these as though they were hundreds of other little suckers all over the lid of our box. If you want, you don't have to do that. I just think it's fun and cool and gives me something to do with all of this extra stuff. And I don't worry about if a particular, like, if the correct, like, way of glowy, like how I was very careful with the tentacles, like with the sucker cups on the tentacles. I'm not worried at all now about the positioning of how any of this is coming out. So I'm actually going to make some that are quite big. I'm just going to take them and I'm going to roll them and then I'm going to stuff them. Boop, just like that. And then we can take this and go like boop. And then we can take a small one and put it on the tip of our stylus and place it there and then boop. And we can do stuff like that all over the whole piece if you want to. So, yeah, I think that's what I want to do. So I'm going to start with big pieces and kind of get them positioned and smush them. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. So I've got one of these that's going to be the biggest. I'll roll this one out just a little bit thinner. And yeah, just start building it in waves all the way around. And then I will be putting this into a preheated toaster oven at 275 degrees, or follow the directions on your package. I'm going to be baking mine for about 45 minutes. But I'm going to do it in waves. I'm going to bake for 15, check on it, bake for 15, check on it. Because some of these legs are pretty thick, but I just want to make sure that like nothing catches on fire. I doubt that that'll be the case, because like with the resin, worst case scenario that I've encountered in the past is it discolors, it kind of curls and bubbles, and it stinks. Like literally stinks. Like it smells bad, like burning plastic. But that was me baking something that was just straight, like, resin. So we'll see how this plays out. I'm so nervous because I've spent all the ding-dong day on this. I think it's looking really cool, though. Oh, no, we got a little crack. Stop doing that. So that crack keeps happening. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually adding just a little bit of texture here. But what I'm doing more than texture is just kind of daubing all of that back together. Yep. So hopefully, and we may actually, is going to be kind of weird, but we are designing a fantastical beast of sorts. I'm going to slice just a little, and I'm just going to add another sucker there. Smoosh. There we go. So he's just got an extra sucker. That's fine. It's a birthmark. So that's my remedy for that. Pretty much. Cool beans. But yeah, just popping in little guys. Little smush. Little smush. Alright, for realsies now. Gonna finish this up, pop it into bake, and then I'll meet you guys back here after I've pulled it out of the oven. So this is how it's looking so far, and I'm gonna say my first impression is the iris is not nearly as green as what it was. I think the resin suffered the way I anticipated whenever I baked it, but look at this super cool crackle effect that we got in the pupil that was not there before. So this is how it's looking. Let's close the curtain and see how it glows. Ooh, oh my goodness. Okay, so that's glowing pretty nicely. Oh my gosh, and I don't have any filters or anything going, you guys. Wow, wow, wow. Oh, that's neat. Oh, that is really, really neat. Oh, ah! Thanks, Randy. This looks cool though, huh?
What you doing in there?
Nothing. Alrighty, y'all. So I would like to add some final details to this piece. So I'm going to begin by removing the foil that proved to not be necessary at all, but I didn't know that at the time. So, and if anything, it did keep the wood from scorching in the oven. And I'm going to begin by painting the entire interior and exterior of the box with black paint. This is just apple barrel black matte acrylic paint. And you could do this in whatever color that you like. But I'm just going to come through, use the same paintbrush I've been using. Yeah, it's a little crunchy, but that's alright. I'm just going to I'm actually putting some onto a paint palette today, which is like so unlike me, but that's fine. And I'm not watering it down or diluting it at all. But we'll kind of do a bit, let it dry, do a bit, let it dry. Oh, I'm already getting paint everywhere, so. And I may do multiple coats. We'll see what it needs. This is actually, and I've said this before, but I hesitate to call this a cheap paint because I actually feel like it's pretty good quality. It's just inexpensive. So cheapness implies like a lack of quality, but it is very affordable paint and does exactly what I need it to. So that's very, very good. That's exactly what I'm looking for in a big, inexpensive jar of paint. Because I mean, that whole whopping thing, it's 32 ounces, was like $8, I think. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. It's been a long time. So I'm just going to go through and keep doing this, and I'm going to finish it up off camera, doing this part, and then I'll meet you guys back here for the next step. So I have painted the box, got a little bit of paint on the tentacles where like I kind of didn't mean to, but I think that'll be all right because the next step is, let me check and make sure I actually did get all of the inside. I did, cool. The next step is I have my palette here and I have a pipette with water in it, and I'm going to put some water into there, and I'm going to take just a little bit of paint. Mostly I'm just cleaning my brush into the water. Like, I want very, very watery. In fact, I'm going to put down this kind of dirty old shop towel to soak up anything underneath it, because I want to come through and just apply this into all of these crevices, just applying it as a wash, being pretty stinking heavy-handed with it, maybe even adding in some more paint in spots where I think it might be useful. And you don't have to do this. I just personally really like it. Makes everything look a little bit more grungy and adds some depth and detail. Now this can, if you're too heavy-handed with it, it can interfere with how your glow effects may happen. But for me, that was a risk I'm willing to take. And also, I can kind of buff it off a little bit as we as it dries. But I'm trying to be pretty quick about it. And I mean, the more watery the better, because I really want to be able to have it settle into all those little sucker holes and little whatever these things are. I don't know, I kind of keep thinking that's almost her brood, like her little clutch of eldritch eggs. Because what better place to hide your treasures than below the nest of an eldritch horror? So right here you can see we have some wiggling, and that's okay, but we can come in after we've painted everything and super glue that, like kind of spot super glue it. So again, I'm going to bring in another pipette of water, a little bit more paint, just mixing that in before just bringing it all around. Now you could use a little bit of maybe dish soap as like a surfactant to help break the surface tension of the water, but I'm not that picky about this. So again, just bringing it around. I'm focusing primarily on the little tentacle suckers, just because that's where we did all of that detail with the leather tool. So I really want to try to get some low lights in there, as well as just in there around the base. We can even do a little swipe up and around here. Now we will want to let this dry completely before we start gluing that little wiggly spot. But yeah, that's probably my favorite way of applying, is just getting a lot on my brush and then just swiping around. Because that way it just pulls and settles. And so here you can see a difference between antiqued and not antiqued. And so you can decide for yourself which you prefer. Because if I didn't do it your favorite way in this project, then you can do it your favorite way on your project. Because this is how I like this. So to each their own. Now also, I haven't touched this up at all as far as going through and cleaning things. So this is actually a little too grungy for what I'm going for, because I do want to bring out the high points as well. So the way that we're going to do that is I'm going to clean my brush, and I'm going to get some clean water on it, and then I'm just going to go through and kind of paint just the high points before coming through, like just wet it and then wick it off with a paper towel. You could also use like Q-tips or something like that, but I really like shop towels for this because they don't leave behind like scuzzies. Okay, cleaning my brush one more time. I'm gonna set that off to the side. And now I'm just gonna come through, I think, with the shop towel and just dab and clean up those high points. And I'm not being too delicate with it, because quite frankly, if it's gonna break, I want it to break right now. That way I can get that fixed, as opposed to if there's like, you know, delicate spots, I don't want to have to coddle it and it break like 6 months from now, and then I don't feel like fixing it, so it just stays broken. Because I'm very lazy, like so lazy. So again, and coming through, cleaning up like how it's pooling in different spots, the paint is. And so again, we can come through with a slightly damp but clean brush and scrub the spots that we don't want that paint building up and settling. Because also, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think this looks pretty cool right now as is, but once we get the glaze on it, it is going to come to life. So I really want to have this as nice and cleaned up as I can get it. So that we can put that glaze on there and really make it look like just wet and alive and horrifying. I mean, just like in a cute way. It's like, aw, that's disturbing. Like, I love his little tentacle right there, you guys. Boop, boop. He's such a cutie pie. But yeah, just coming through. Scrub, scrub, scrub. You can even get in there with your finger if you can. Or maybe like a sponge brush might be really helpful. Just something that's a little bit more like abrasive to rub that paint off. And I'm just dabbing and lifting. Some will end up being darker than others, and so you can kind of pay a little bit more attention to those spots. But yeah, just coming through, all nice and tidied and dabbed up. So I'm going to let this dry completely. And now that we've gotten most of it off, I do want to take a look around from different perspectives, because like we had some pooled down here. There we go. Yeah, there's a little bit of paint. You can just kind of scrape it off with your nail. And it gets to a point too that I just start rubbing it in. It's just going to be that way. It's just going to live there. And we can also, if there's a spot that is just going to have paint there, we can just rub it around with the paintbrush and darken it in a little bit. So that might actually give some really cool effects. There we are. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry completely. I'm just going to put a fan on it and let it sit for about 20 minutes. And then I'll meet you guys back here for glazing. So our box is completely dry now, even on the inside. And I am using Mod Podge Hard Coat. You could use also even just regular Mod Podge works well. This is just what I have. And I'm going to get some onto my brush. And I am going to be very generous with this because I want a very slimy looking little critter. And it can self-level itself off a little bit. So if I'm a little heavier handed with it, I feel like that's better than being skimpy, because with the self-leveling, so if we're heavier handed with it, then it should self-level itself out. That just I don't know, it sounds weird to say self-level itself, but it'll self-level back out, and we won't have to worry so much about brush strokes getting left. Also, this does behave like it's a pretty good adhesive as well, so keep that in mind if you get a bunch of like dog fur or something stuck in it. And I'm just going to keep stippling this and slathering it on. But knowing that it's an adhesive, you want to be a little bit careful whenever you're doing the rest of the box that you don't like accidentally glue the lid shut or something. So I'm going to focus entirely on the tentacles first, and then I'll go through, and after the tentacles are completely dry, I'll go through and glaze the box if we want it glazed, because you may not want a shiny box. And honestly, that may be what I do now that I'm thinking about it, is to just leave the box be nice and matte. I think that'll showcase the sculpture a little bit better. So again, very heavy-handed. If you get some on the glass of your eye, you can just let it dry, and then I usually use like a little razor or something to just scrape it off. But I am going to do a couple of coats of this, and then we will pan out into some slow motion close-ups after it's all dry and said and done. So I want to take this opportunity to thank you guys so much, especially if you're here hanging out during the premiere. Hey everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with me. And if you would have liked to have been in the premiere, hanging out in live chat, but missed out, be sure to sign up for our newsletter, because I send out notifications every time we have a new tutorial or live stream or shop update or anything like that. And that way you don't miss a thing. You don't have to rely on YouTube notifications or social media or any algorithms or anything like that. You'll still be able to be among the first to know. And if you enjoy our tutorials and would like to support the creation of more of them, please consider joining our Craft Along Club. For as little as $1 a month, you really help keep the gears chugging along here in our home studio with free tutorials and all the different things that we do. But yeah, links for all that stuff will be down in the video description below. And if you ever have any questions about anything, you feel free to email me at backtoearthcreations@yahoo.com, and I will do my best to be helpful to you. And let us go now to see the final result. Bye guys, happy crafting.